If you've ever tried to talk your spouse, your parents, your kids, some other family member into prepping, and you've gotten nothing but that awkward silence, you're not alone. Today, we are going to talk about why that resistance is there and maybe what you can do to overcome it to get the people that you care about on this prepping bandwagon with you without all of the doom and gloom. Before we dive in, I would just like to ask a huge favor. If you are enjoying the content on this channel, if you find my videos helpful, I would love it if you would just show me some love by going down to my tip jar and buying me a cup of coffee. That will just help me know that the information that I'm providing you is valuable and that you appreciate what I am giving to you free here on my YouTube channel. And it would just make me smile. And so I would really appreciate that if you could do that. Welcome back to Preparedness. I am Laura. We talk all things prepping and self-sufficiency, and I am so glad you're here. Today, we are diving into a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that is how do we get the people in our lives that we care about on board with this idea of being more prepared for emergencies. And I think to really dive into this topic, the first thing we have to talk about is why is there this resistance? Why is there this negative kind of emotion, negative connotation around prepping? And I think it is because we have kind of stigmatized this world in our country, right? In the United States in particular, we have shows like Doomsday Preppers where we really show the most eccentric, the most outlandish, the craziest stories to talk about prepping. And because of that, we have created this idea that prepping is for crazy people or for people who want bunkers in their backyard or for people who are ready for the zombies to attack. And I think that has been the narrative that has been pushed in TV, in movies, again, in the popular media. And so we are working against a stereotype and against a narrative that sometimes is hard to overcome. When I got into this space, it took me probably almost 3 years before I was comfortable saying I am a prepper. Up until then, it was like, hey, I store some things for some emergencies. I have an emergency kit in my car. We don't really talk about prepping because, again, it was this kind of negative label that I really struggled with. And what I have kind of learned over time is I am trying to be more vocal about being a prepper and being more prepared, because I think the more that we talk about it, the more likely we are going to be able to sort of change this narrative around the idea of being more prepared without it being that awkward, weird conversation that sometimes it can feel like it really is. The sad part is 60% of Americans are really not prepared for any type of emergency. And I would argue probably fewer than 10 to 15% of the population is really ready for any sort of long-term emergency, any kind of thing that would disrupt supply chains, that would create just a challenge in this country. And so prepping, honestly, is just common sense. It is really being prepared for the unexpected. And I think as we change the narrative around that, we can begin to get the people in our family on board with this idea. So the first kind of piece to this is really reframing how we talk about prepping. Again, prepping is been kind of narrated as a doom and gloom situation, as an apocalypse. And as you know, if you've been watching this channel at all, it's not really kind of the narrative that I want to share with you. It really is more about just being prepared for the unexpected. So it's a lot like insurance. And most of us have insurance. We have car insurance, we have house insurance, we have health insurance. All that is insurance to prepare for the unexpected, right? We hope we are never in a car wreck. We hope that our house never catches on fire. We hope that we never have a significant health issue, but we have insurance to make sure that if those situations arise, we are ready for them and it doesn't destroy the rest of our lives, right? And that is really all that prepping is. And so kind of the first thing that you can do when you start talking about being more prepared with your family is to start with that kind of empathetic look, that kind of, hey, this is a normalized thing. This is just like insurance. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be crazy. We can start small. And I think when we start kind of talking about prepping in terms of real world events that we have seen and go, hey, I would really like to be more prepared for X. So that's how it worked in my family. So when I came home from my national security course that I've talked about on these videos, where I really realized how fragile things were in this country, whether that was a cyber attack, another war, water scarcity, drought, famine, etc. When I came home and started talking to my husband, I didn't say, hey babe, let's become preppers, because that wouldn't have worked and it wouldn't have really probably encouraged him. He would have been like, great, my wife's going crazy again. And it would have shut him down. Instead, I said, hey, I've been thinking, and I would really like to be a little bit more prepared for weather emergencies. The beauty of that was we had just had a freak storm in Colorado called a bomb cyclone, which was hurricane force winds and a blizzard all at once, which caused a lot of damage. And the beauty of having that storm was it really kind of opened our eyes to sort of the threat that was really there in Colorado. And so I was able to say, hey, I would really like to build some kits for our cars so that we can be prepared if we get stuck out on the road, if we need to wait for help to come, we have a way to survive. And that is how I got my foot in the prepping door with my husband. Because guess what? That sounds completely rational. It sounds normal. It doesn't sound crazy, and it doesn't sound like you're trying to build a bunker. It just sounds like you want to be prepared for common situations. So the first tip is just look for things in your area that you are concerned about. That could be cold weather like we have in Colorado. It could be tornadoes like we have here in Oklahoma. It could be hurricanes if you live on the coast. Look in the news and think about the things that you are kind of concerned about and just approach it that way. It needs to be a calm conversation. Hey, I would really like to be a little bit more prepared in case we experience a weather situation, in case we experience a power outage. I would like to just get a few supplies together so that I feel comfortable. Nobody in your family is probably going to push back on that, right? So again, it's a lot about how we present this information to the people that we care about. It is having that conversation in a calm manner about real world kind of scenarios that allow them to really visualize putting themselves in that situation and what they would like to have. When we start reframing that conversation, it makes it a lot less kind of overwhelming for the people that we are talking to. Because although you may have a reason that you are in this prepping space, not everybody around you is going to have that same reason. And so being able to have that conversation in a practical way is really going to help. The second way to get buy-in is just to create what I will call easy wins. Again, this goes back to the idea of really starting small and really being focused on what you want to be prepared for. Maybe that is creating a bag that you throw in your garage in case you need to leave your house quickly for an emergency situation. Maybe that is putting supplies in your trunk so that if you were stuck out in your car somewhere, you have a way to respond. These are all easy wins that don't freak people out. They're easy wins that we can sell to the outside world, because when we get some of those easy wins, it is easy to build on the momentum. Now, I was fortunate or not fortunate, depending on how you want to look at it, in that kind of in 2019, back in March when I started, was roughly a year before we experienced COVID and kind of the lockdown situation. And so I had already kind of put a lot of things in place by the time COVID hit. And we were also able to sort of pay attention to the news. So when we saw things kind of getting a little bit more chaotic and we thought, hey, there could be supply chain issues, we were able to make that last run to Sam's Club and go get supplies that we needed for our house. The great thing about that was by then I had kind of normalized it with my husband. And so when I said, hey, babe, I'm a little bit worried that there are going to be some shortages and that we may want to be stocked up on some supplies, he said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's go do that. And we ran down to Sam's Club. We filled 2 carts full of stuff and we came home, and we really didn't have to stress out during COVID because we had everything at our house that we needed for our day-to-day life. The beauty of that was once my husband had seen how that worked, then he was even more kind of interested in, hey, how do we build on this? And how do we make sure that we are prepared for the things that could really be disruptive? So we want to go build slowly and really get that buy-in from people. And having those quick wins will allow you to do that and then build momentum as you go. Now, here's what's going to happen. You are going to do all of these things. You're going to think that you're being completely logical. And then there's going to be someone in your life that says, that's never going to happen. I don't have to worry about it. So there's a couple ways to approach that. One, you can just say, you know what? That's great. If that's what you want to believe, good luck. Don't come to my house if there's a problem. Or you can say, hey, I know that you feel that way, but if you've watched in the news lately, there have been issues with, and start listing out some of the challenges. That could be the floods in North Carolina that wiped out entire cities. It could be the wildfires in California that wiped out entire communities. It could be hurricanes that hit almost every season. It could be the tornadoes that hit here in Oklahoma. Find that evidence-based stuff that really does make it a little bit harder to argue and say, well, it'll never happen here. Because when you look at those maps, the reality is that it happens everywhere. We all face slightly different emergencies, but we do all face emergencies. Now, hopefully it won't be you, but as we always say in the military, hope is not a COA or a course of action, meaning I can't just hope that it's going to be okay. I need to take consistent action to plan for it. Having those kind of examples ready, again, in a calm manner, in a conversational tone, not accusatory, but instead of like, hey, I know it really feels like that sometimes, but I was Googling this story and I realized that these things happen across the country and I just want us to be more prepared. The other thing is just keep modeling the behavior that you would love to see in your family. So I used a lot of my military experience and my background to talk about why I thought those things were a threat. And so it was a slow build, right? And I think that just by modeling the behavior that we want, modeling this idea of being more prepared, we can have those conversations in a organic way versus a out of the blue forceful way. If you model the behavior, people are going to be more likely to follow your example. And that's just human nature, right? We want to follow the people that we care about. We want to be connected to them. And a lot of times that is enough to get those reluctant family members to go, oh, hey, that makes sense. And then the last thing is just making sure that you start where you are and then build slowly. And again, try to take people with you along the journey. When you're talking to family, when you're talking to friends, don't start here at the thing that you're at 5-6 years into this journey. Go back to the beginning and tell them why you started. Tell them how you started. Those are the stories and wins that you want to share with the people around you so that they buy into this prepping thing. Okay, and here's the last thing I will just say about getting the people that you care about on board with prepping. You cannot change somebody else's mind. You cannot make them care about something they don't care about. It's just impossible. You can have rational conversations, you can be calm, you can make recommendations, you can model behavior. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't think prepping makes sense and doesn't want to do it, you probably aren't going to necessarily change their minds. If that means that your spouse is not on board, then I think it really is about creating small ideas and small wins that you can do. Maybe it's agreeing to a small budget that you can spend on prepping, even though they think it's crazy, right? That is a great way to approach it is, hey, I'm going to spend $25-$50 and every month I'm just going to spend that. And that's going to be what I spend my extra spending money on. And you don't have to do that. That is a way to then sometimes diffuse that challenge. But again, I would argue that for most of us, as we kind of build on this, if we can talk logically, if we can make it seem less about doom and gloom and less about total chaos and apocalypse and zombies and more about insurance, most family members will at least have an aha moment to go, oh yeah, some of that makes sense. I might not do as much as they do, but I understand why they are doing that. So hopefully you have gotten some ideas on how to approach those family members who maybe are a little bit resistant, or those friends that you want to talk about, but you really are worried they're going to think you're nuts. Because I will say, as I have kind of expanded my circle of people who know that I prep, there is still an edge to me sometimes where I'm like, oh, they're going to think I'm crazy. And finally, I've just kind of gotten over that because most of my friends think I'm crazy anyway, so it works out. But also, I've been able to reframe how I talk about prepping so that it doesn't feel quite so heavy, overwhelming, and crazy. It feels more like, hey, just practical steps and actions. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Hopefully you got a few ideas for how to talk to those folks. If you haven't done so already, hit like, hit subscribe. I would really appreciate it.